to the main stage with Boombox Music Talk.
The bass thing kind of came up because I knew kids that played guitar, I knew kids that played drums, but I didn't know any other bass players.
So, look around for a need and start coming up with ideas to fill that need.
Yeah, man, cool, right? It is cool. If it's something you, if it's something you do, like,
Welcome to Boombox Music Talk. I'm Mark.
And I'm Krish.
And today on the main stage, we have a ridiculously talented musician,
A budding photographer.
a social introvert,
A feline friend.
a family friend,
A true music lover.
and just an all-around good guy, Mr. Stacy Shew. Stacy is an experienced, versatile musician who's played with some of the best to come out of East Texas. And he brings a wealth of musical knowledge as well as just general life skills to the table, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had to miss this session with Stacy. Had to take one for the team, handle some other business.
Nefarious business.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of disappeared there for a while. Where you been?
Yeah, I need to take care of some stuff.
Yeah?
That's as specific as I'd like to be.
Mm-hmm. So, do you remember the first time you guys met?
Oh, man. I was a kid. I come from a family of musicians, obviously, as you know, and fortunately, and I can't believe, now that we have kids, seeing what my parents let me do all the time, but I would go to rehearsals that Wizard, that Troy and Brett were in, would do, and they shared a rehearsal space with Brazil that Kirk's in as well. And so, Stacy was in that circle.
Did you get that, Ma? Your boy is in the inner circle, which doesn't exist.
So I would go and just be a fly on the wall and soak it up and probably see a lot of stuff I shouldn't have seen. But my parents were not aware of that, thankfully.
Very trusting.
Well, I think less trusting,
or maybe naive,
more warn the F out.
Yeah.
That was more like it. I was the fourth, so they were like, all right, whatever, dude, just don't die.
They're like, the first three survived just fine. So here you go.
Yeah.
Out into the world like
So
a little
now
bird.
Yeah. What's funny is that rehearsal hall, I think, it was owned by one of my good friends, Cody Weaver. His father owned the space. He was an orthodontist. And Cody was, you've heard me talk about him, like he's in that same circle with Matt Brown that I've referenced. Mm-hmm. And Cody was in my first real band in 7th grade, Vice, and he was the drummer in there. We used to play stuff like Unskinny Bop from Poison and I Want to Be With You from Pretty Boy Floyd.
Is that the first boy band?
Yeah, they kind of were. They were like a metal boy band, basically.
As I was walking out of class the other day, I saw you. Don't think I've ever seen you around here before. You must be new.
But those songs were better than what we started out trying to play with stuff like Youth Gone Wild from Skid Row.
A little over-ambitious there.
Yeah, Like, most musicians can't play that song.
Yeah.
Or at least singers, I should say.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it was really close to where your grandfather's practice was. It was like... It was in White House, but it was on the way out of White House on 110
outside
in
the city limits,
little
like that
shopping center on the right.
I remember exactly where you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Is that where your your grandfather's was?
No, it wasn't very far from there, like maybe a minute, 2 max down the road, but it was by that old club. They used to call it, was it Outlaws?
Yeah, Marshall's other place.
Well, there was Marshall's was the small
Outlaws.
place, and then Outlaws was the big, like,
Where you went if you wanted to see somebody throw up at least once a night or get in a fight.
Yeah, and then or the night not the night, but where you would go if you wanted to get roofied. So
yeah,
that was White House's hoppin' roofie place.
Hey, we want to roofie some girls tonight. Where do you want to go? Go to Outlaws. Nobody pays attention there.
Nope.
Yeah, that burned. I think that place burnt. Well, Marshall's
burnt down. Actually, it was funny because in 2010. I was working in the same area. There was that newer shopping center that was between, the White House and Tyler city limits. And it was right before you get to the Marshall's place. And so I was coming from there and I passed, that parking lot. I just happened to notice though that it had been leveled and I was like, what the And so then
they finally got in a big boom-bastic fight.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, the night that it caught on fire, my cousin Rusty was there that night, but it happened like after everybody left. So it happened at I want to say 3 or 4 in the morning or something like that, or at least that's the information I got. And it burned down real fast.
I'm sure.
It was like a matchbox.
Yep.
And literally, when I drove by, it was nothing but the foundation left. It was still smoldering a little bit, had a little bit of smoke, still coming out from the embers. My cousin showed up and he was like, "Did you hear about Marshall's place?" And I was like, "I didn't hear about it. I saw it. I drove by this morning. It was still smoldering." He was very disappointed about it. I was not so attached to that place.
Had you ever gone?
1, maybe 2 times. I think one time I was actually underage. I think I was probably 16 maybe. And then, also my best friend growing up, her parents were in a band.
Oh, that's right.
All growing up, called The Mirage.
Okay.
And they played classic rock, and I don't know if that was considered classic rock at the time, but anyway, classic rock and country and kind of southern rock, kind of all that.
That's perfect for that place.
Yeah. And they were actually pretty good, but anyway, so that's why I was familiar with them, because they used to play there pretty regularly. But I didn't go until after that band had already disbanded, and then so it was very seedy, hole in the wall, dark, dingy, grimy.
Again, my mom. Well, I was older at this point. I was probably in high school, I guess. But my first introduction was to that place was when John moved back to East Texas, and he started playing with a band called Night's Rain. He was playing bass in that band, and
that's so fitting for John.
I know.
Night's Rain.
I know. They did a lot of classic rock and just a little bit mix of everything. But I remember going, and I can't remember. I had to ask John what his setup was back then. I think it was a Hartkey cab, and I can't remember what the head was, but anyway, his bass sound was so good. And of course, I was still in high school, right? But they started playing, and they had a keyboard player, and they started playing No More Tears. With that
Ozzy?
Yes, that bass line. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Oh my God, that's so funny, because I had bought that album. I think I did buy that album, but then I also had bought the greatest hits. It was like a 2 or 4 CD set, something like that.
Depends on at what point in his career you bought a greatest hits, because I think
there's millions. This would probably be in 96, somewhere around there. And I just remember I played those 3 or 2 albums, really, greatest hits, but multiple CDs, and then the No More Tears every day. It was part of my rotation.
So good. And I got to go in and see, and little did I know, fast forward several years, 1996 to 98, and I'm gigging in my own band, playing at Marshall's all the time, and it's such a love-hate relationship because I had some of the funnest shows there. You know, people enjoyed the music. They had a great time.
Actually appreciated it. They were there usually to hear the music. I mean, get drunk too and rowdy, but definitely the music was a very large part of why people even bothered to go there.
Yep. So I took it real serious and, you know, got drunk and stood on Drew's shoulders. And I remember one time I was playing a song and John was running sound and he looks up at me and he makes eye contact and he does like air guitar and he puts his, you know, a hand like it's on a fret. And he looks at me and he shakes his head no, and then he moves his hand down like half a step to show me that you're not playing the right key, dude. Oh my gosh, some great times there, but it's no surprise that it burned up easily because every time I played a show there and I came back home, if you opened a gig bag or a case, literally it was like, you know, the smoke monster from Lost. Well, this was a real smoke monster, and it would just come up and eat your face off. It was, oh my gosh, it was so strong.
I totally believe that. You can actually see the smoke like coming out of it when you would drive by it.
Yeah.
Like not burning down situation.
Right.
Pretty sure though that I'm pretty sure that it was an electrical fire.
Air quotes around electrical because I'm sure they had some air quote money problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that would make sense actually.
At any rate, speaking of John, you know, my brothers, that's really kind of how I got to know Stacy, and I remember seeing him playing Wizard, but it wasn't really until, you know, we were grown adults with families that we reconnected and bonded really.
So, what in your mind did you enjoy learning the most about Stacy while he was here visiting with us?
You know, there's a few things really. One of the things I thought was really cool is just how he really understands that using music to connect with others, and specifically you'll hear in this episode him talking about using it to help overcome his introversion. You know, we mentioned in the intro how he's a feline friend. He sent me some notes. He was like, I'm a friend to all cats, which totally makes sense for
Stacey. So he's kind of like the cat whisperer.
Totally, he is.
He definitely has a very like calming affect, you know, about him.
And I can relate to that. You know, when he talks about being kind of introverted in school, fortunately, you know, I had older brothers, I played sports, and I was much more outgoing. But when it actually came to having friends, it was hard for me to make friends. Still is hard for me. So as an adult playing in a band, it helped me be able to get out and meet people and talk to people, because otherwise I would just probably sit in my house and play my guitar and not talk to anybody. You know, so I totally understood where he's coming from that. And I think it probably helps a lot of people that way.
I would agree. I think that, well, and it's kind of like the studies, the psychological studies, the medical studies of people who have like Alzheimer's or autism, where no other external stimuli really affects them in a positive way. But if you play music for them, it's like the key that unlocks, you know, their brain at that moment. It's really been scientifically proven to affect people in all the ways they don't even understand themselves, you know, the ones being affected. But it's definitely a universal thread that you can connect, weave
together.
Yeah, weave together and kind of forget those feelings of introversion, and because now you're reaching out with, you know, those threads to other people who may identify as well.
Interesting, right? It's like when you're at a concert and you see some dude next to you rocking out, and you look at each other and you make eye contact and you just kind of do the rock out fingers, you know. You don't know this person at all. But at that moment, you understand each other on this weird metaphysical level of just, yeah, man, cool, right? It is cool. It meant something to you. It meant something to me too. Rock out, you know?
human mind can only perceive 3 dimensions of physical space and then the 4th dimension of time. So again, space and time is the space in which we dwell, the dimension in which we live. And what's really interesting is our capacity to pattern that 4-dimensional reality. I mean, one of the reasons that I love things like music is that music is a kind of painting in time. You know, whereas other artwork, like if you look at a painting on the wall, that is a static 2D image. That is not necessarily an experience that unfolds in time. It's an experience that unfolds in space. But music is a patterned slice of space and time. Music is a subjective experience that you actually step into and that actually unfolds in the dimension in which we actually live and breathe, which is that 4-dimensional reality. So when you talk about the power of rhythm, when you talk about the power of collective ecstasy, why people go to concerts, why people go to festivals, because the musicians essentially start by instrumenting rhythm. So all of a sudden they create a collective synchronized rhythm that again is patterned in space and in time, and you're hearing it and it loops around it. So you start to pattern the rhythm that unfolds in space and time, and then you invite the audience to step into it. So all of a sudden everybody becomes synchronized, you know, so we all become one thing, and that's what's called collective experience. And in that ecstasis, in that merger where everybody becomes synchronized under one patterned experience that unfolds in space and in time is when music purges us. It's when music leads to that aesthetic arrest, that consummation. We pop out on the other side of that experience saying, oh my God, that festival was amazing. I felt so connected to the people. The vibes were so good. You had to be there to know what I feel. These experiences are ineffable. They are beyond articulation. Words do not give them justice. And the ineffability of these musical ecstasis, of this capacity of music and concert and vibe and people together to create these shared ecstasy, this electronic Buddhism in which the self vanishes, is one way in which we escape death. It's one way in which we pierce the finite, and for a second we become infinite.
So I totally get it. And I remember when I would come off stage, a lot of times people would just, come up and want to talk, and which is cool. I'm not complaining, but at the same time, I was kind of complaining because I was like, no, thank you. Actually, I don't really want to talk to any of y'all. I just want you to come to the show and
just experience this.
Yeah. Anyway, and one of the other things he talks about is just why the inspiration for what you do matters. Having to feel inspired to do the things you do. And there's a lot of ways you can kind of look at that, but I kind of saw it as it's almost the difference between there are some musicians that I played with who are playing so that they could play a show, have fun, and kind of be in that moment, and that's what they were inspired by, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I think Stacy's this way too, but for me, it was about the music. Mm-hmm. I was inspired by the music, and that's what made me want to experience it through it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think too of the root word of music is muse, good so point. In itself is, at its most basic point, a inspiration.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I remember I was so in love with that idea of the muse, when I was a kid and first started reading, like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and they talk about that a lot, about that inspiring them. So one of the other things is taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. He really talks about that. He talks about how his father did that. All those things kind of go together to me. And I don't know, I thought it was really interesting. So I hope everybody finds some joy out of that, just like how he kind of just talks about finding joy in your craft instead of kind of trying to create the joy.
Instead of trying to craft the joy.
Yeah, exactly. Very well said.
Awesome. Well, just a quick reminder, you can find playlists with songs and videos referenced in this episode on YouTube and Spotify at Boombox Music Talk.
That's right. And now it's time to get on with the show. So for Boombox Music Talk, I'm Mark.
And I'm Krish.
And we urge you to enjoy the journey.
And stay zen.